Hi, my name is Allison Carrier, and I'm a dance teacher at Earl of March High School in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Today is the first in a four-part video series entitled The Four Foundation Elements of Dance. In this video, we're going to explore the concept of shape, one of the foundation elements, and how we can incorporate that in our dance classrooms, both at the elementary and at the high school level. I hope you enjoy this video. The four foundation elements of dance are really a lens for which students can observe dance, create dance, and then talk about dance. So what we're really doing is providing a common language that we can use in our classrooms. So we can use that at an elementary level or at the secondary level. And here in my classroom, we start with the four foundation elements. They are shape, space, time, and motion. Today we're going to discuss shape and different ways to observe shape, how to recognize it, and then how to have that common language that I was just speaking to. I'm going to go behind me right now, and I'm going to begin with demonstrating the shapes and showing you how to categorize and recognize them with your students. All right, so when we're talking about shape, we want to think about it as though if I was to film a dancer moving through space, what I would be able to do is press pause at any point, and perhaps their body would be in a shape. And then what I could do in that frozen picture is I could start to talk using the language of theory and our knowledge of shape to describe what I see. The idea behind that is that once I start to identify certain shapes and how they're being used and when they're being used within the body of a piece, I can start to ask questions about the choreographer's intention, what they want the audience to see and feel, and how those shapes that they chose were intentional and directed towards creating a narrative or a story in their dance. So the first thing we really want to do is we want to teach students how to recognize shape and the different shapes, and then to classify them so that we can speak further to it. So the first shape I'm going to talk about are linear shapes. Linear shapes are any shape that does not bend at an angle. So it's pretty self-explanatory in a way. I'm in the linear shape right now. My arm is linear. My other arm is linear. My leg is linear. So any shape created by a dancer's body that does not bend at a joint. So when we're talking about choreography, we're talking about a choreographer's intention. What we might be thinking is, well, why would they choose those shapes? Well, we might describe a linear shape as being clean, clear, crisp, strong. We probably see a lot of linear shapes when watching jazz, for instance. So if we're talking about choreographers' intentions, we might start to talk and ask students why or they think that the choreographer chose to use really linear shapes in their piece and what their intention was and how that lends to the story. So again, shape one, linear. Second type of shape classification that we could observe is angular shapes. Angular shapes are just a little bit different from linear in that they are shapes that bend at a joint. Right now, I'm creating an angular shape with my arm. I'm creating angular shapes with my knees and my arms. My body bent over, I'd also consider an angular shape. And I guess my elbow was bent up, so I would also consider that angular. Any bending at a joint is considered angular. Again, these shapes and images are often found when a choreographer's intention is to show the audience something strong or powerful. So to review, linear shapes, I'm just going to use my arm, angular shapes. Linear, no bend at a joint, angular, bends at a joint. A third shape classification that we use is curved. A curved shape is exactly that. It would look like a curve. Now, I'm going to do a curved arm. It doesn't look perfectly curved, but it definitely is not considered angular. So here's a curved arm. Here's an angular arm. A curved arm is any curved shape. So when I'm talking about a curved shape, I'm also talking about a contraction or curve to the back. So perhaps I can make a curved shape just for the top of my back. When I'm creating curved shapes, what I'm doing, I think as a choreographer, is I'm sending a really different feeling or message than something that would be linear or angular. Curved shapes can be maybe softer, more gentle, more introspective when we're talking about a contraction. And again, if I'm creating a piece of choreography and I'm a choreographer, I always ask my students, well, why would I choose to use a curved shape versus a linear or angular shape? Well, it's because I'm trying to draw out different emotions for my audience or different stories or narratives. To review, linear, angular, curved. These shapes can also be presented as symmetrical and asymmetrical. So on top of being able to observe linear, angular, and curved, we also ask the students to identify symmetrical and asymmetrical. For me, as a choreographer, when you see dancers using symmetrical shapes, it's rare. There's not a lot of times if I was to watch a dancer move through space and press freeze, that you would see all of the dancers, or even one of the dancers, standing in a perfectly symmetrical shape. So that can be really powerful. So if you want to create a moment of power, of unity as a choreographer during the creative process, I think that's a really good place to start, and I really like my students to start identifying those choices. So we have symmetrical shapes, which means same thing on both sides. Symmetrical and linear. Symmetrical and angular. Symmetrical and curved. Oppositely then, we have symmetrical, we have asymmetrical. Most of the time you're going to see dancers moving in space asymmetrically. Even by virtue of the fact that we're moving forward and backward through space, we're never capable of doing symmetrical shapes. So asymmetrical, anything that is different, if I cut my body on half, on both sides. So here I have asymmetrical, linear. Asymmetrical, angular. Symmetrical, linear. Asymmetrical, linear. Those are the classifications. The final one would be twisted. A twisted shape, as a choreographer, if I'm using twisted shapes, they're going to be accents. So I use a twisted shape as an accent and to create interesting imagery. A twisted shape could just be as simple as twisted arms, twisted legs, so physically twisting our limbs. Another example of a twisted shape is anytime I'm rotating around the torso. So I have a twisted torso, so if we're talking about spirals in Grandmother or modern dance, we would definitely identify this as a twisted shape. My head is turned, I would call that a twisted shape. Again, twisted shapes are predominantly used as accents, especially when we're talking about really building something particular with our arms and legs. So, as educators, we want to teach that lesson, and then we want to provide some ways for students to really get involved with the concepts and start making use of them in your classroom. We typically do this through projects, but when I'm introducing the concept, before I introduce a project or any activity, what I'll usually do is I'll have students stand in a circle, and I will just shout out shapes. So I would say something like linear, symmetrical, and then all the students in the classroom would stand in a linear or symmetrical shape, whatever they felt like they wanted to do. Then I would shout out linear, asymmetrical, and so on and so forth. Mixing up symmetrical and asymmetrical. Sometimes I would say something like curved arm, angular leg, and see what they come up with then. So they have to think for a couple seconds. I might even give them a count like 5, 6, 7, 8, and then make them do their curved arm, angular leg, whatever that looked like for them. So that's the way I would introduce it. After I give the lesson, we move out into an open space, and I'll just shout out different shapes and varieties of shapes, and they can just start to ground themselves in that. The next step is I'll have them walk around in a free improv, so we would be walking through the space, and I might shout out, curved, and then students maybe would make a little curved shape with their body. And then we would move around again, and I would show a shape. So we go from this kind of still circle to moving around and then shouting it out. Eventually, how I build on that is I would have students moving through space, and I would say, make any shape, okay? And I would call that shape 1. So I would shout out, shape 1, and they can make whatever shape they want. Now you could tell them you wanted them to make something that was angular and linear, asymmetrical. Okay, so that was their shape 1. So when students have shape 1, I'll say, remember shape 1. And then we'll walk through space again, and I'll say, shape 1, oh, and they would maybe do it again. And we would go through that a couple times until I know that they've got that shape built into their memory. Then we would do a shape 2, still same thing, moving through space. And then I would call out shape 1, and let's say this was their shape 2. Shape 2. Okay, so now students have shape 1 and shape 2. Moving through space, I could call out randomly shape 2. I could call it out twice in a row. Again, we're just trying to build up their memory. So they've got shape 1, shape 2, and then we'll make a shape 3, same way. After that's done, I'll have students spread out in the classroom. They have their shape 1, their shape 2, shape 3. And what I do is I'll just call it out. Shape 1, shape 2, shape 3. Let's just call that shape 3. So we've got shape 1, shape 2, shape 3. Don't put it there. Let's put this arm out. Shape 3. Okay? So now that they have shape 1, shape 2, and shape 3, what I'll say is add some transitional count. So I would have them do shape 1, okay? And then I would say transition for a count of, we call this 1 for a count of 3, really. So we transition for a count of 3, we've got shape 1, and then we would go 2, 3, 4. There's shape 2. So I've got shape 1, 2, 3, 4. That's shape 2. And then I would say transition. Transition would be for another transition of 3. We'd go 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now I have a tiny little phrasing choreography. I've got shape 1. I get students to work on their transition. 1, 2, 3. That's shape 2. And then I would move 1, 2, 3. Shape 3. Once we have that, sometimes I'll have them work with each other. So I'll take one person, their shapes plus transitions, grab someone else in the group, teach each other, put those two phrases together, then we'll perform it together. We try it with different music. We add variations to that. So I'd say repeat shape 1. So maybe they repeat shape 1 twice. Make a longer transition between shape 2 and shape 3, etc. So we can start building. Okay, so that's just something that we do to really work on shape within our classroom. A project that we'll do is I will have students work in groups of 2, and what they will do is they will come up with 8 shapes plus transition per student. So I make 8 shapes, my partner makes 8 shapes, we learn them together. So now we have 16 shapes plus their transitions together. Transitions are just that movement right here between shape 1 and shape 2. So shapes plus transitions. In your group, you have dancer number 1 perform their 8 shapes plus their transitions to present. Dancer number 2 present their 8 shapes plus transitions to present. And then together, they perform all 60 as a final project. I will provide more details about that project in the instructions that come along with this video. Thanks for watching. Check out the link in the video description below for any additional notes on teaching shape. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave it in the comments section. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video, which will be exploring the concept of space.